Once again I get to greet you. It's been quite a while. What a ride we've all been through.
All right, well, it's a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. I have this very esteemed and intrepid panel with me this afternoon, that's going to be talking about innovation. And we have been hearing a lot about innovation and sustainability in this conference, but I wanted to first frame and set the table for us, like why is this actually important for us and how it's relevant to each of us. We have seen, and we're still in the middle of a pandemic, but we have seen sort of like fundamental changes in the way that travel has happened, both from highlighting the vulnerabilities of the travel sector through the pandemic over the last 2.5 years, as well as the changes in the travel patterns, right? And so we're seeing that actually the traveler is changing, and what they are looking at is a much more dispersed destination rather than just focusing on over-tourism and mass tourism. In fact, what we've seen, Airbnb commissioned a study and report back earlier this year, on rebuilding tourism in APAC. And we asked, is there a rise of a more conscious traveler? And what we actually have found is that a majority of travelers, about 57%, actually do care deeply about the implications of their travel choices. 2/3 actually want to use travel to meaningfully connect with communities and cultures. And more than 7 in 10 agree that COVID-19 has changed the way that they're thinking about sustainable tourism, and it's actually more important to them these days. And by sustainable, we don't actually just mean environmentally sustainable, but there are different dimensions, both economic, on the community level, the cultural level, and environmental. So 2 things are very clear. The first is that travelers are getting more value-driven, right? And the second thing is that the whole future is becoming increasingly unclear. And what we actually require is governments and organizations to work together to reshape and evolve the travel industry. And we actually do need innovative thinking in trying to solve some of those problems. So we have this panel up here this afternoon to actually share with us ideas in their various fields and sectors on how they think about innovation. And innovation here is not, within just the business spheres, but we have deliberately chosen a very diverse panel because the spirit of innovation actually can cut across different sectors and organizations. And it's interesting to see the way that this plays out for each individual. So please welcome first Mark. Mark is the co-founder of Carbon Trust, a carbon intelligence platform in travel. And you use data to report, reduce, and remove emissions. And you are also the WiT Startup Champion for 2021. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I had the great pleasure of just being a face on the screen last year, so it's a nice change to be here in person. But yeah, winning the WiT Award last year was a huge stepping stone for our business in terms of demonstrating actual sustainability results, the clients, the partners that we'd achieved, the growth that we were making. So yeah, really, really, really chuffed to be here today. Thank you very much.
Great. And we have Akshai Sarin. Akshai Sarin is a serial impact entrepreneur. You were accorded Top Under 35 award by the Indian Ministry of Commerce and Confederation of Indian Industry, and also the Top 20 Young Creative Entrepreneur in India. It's a pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you for being my PR agent.
Yeah, I hope I've made you blush sufficiently.
Yes,
tell us more about yourself.
What exactly would you like?
You are, I think you have 2 platforms that you operate, right? You have Blessed by and Together.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Well, you didn't mention I'm also a musician, and I was hoping that I could beatbox and you dance. So we could go a little.
You are yes, that's right. And you're a musician as well, but it's
yes.
Tell us more.
So basically, my background is I've been a musician since I was a teenager, and that's been something that's kind of gone through everything I've done. And I was part of the team that set up Red Bull, and then post Red Bull I set up Together, which is Red Bull's style of marketing. And then I realized that I wanted to use my talents for something more purposeful, and I set up Blessed by. And the purpose behind Blessed by is to kind of re-envision traditional capitalistic and commercial enterprise, but more inclusive working with communities and better for the planet. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
Great. Well,
Yeah. Thank you for having
I
me
think
here.
you had a video that you have shared with us, right?
Yeah, that's just a little like 1 minute on Blessed by.
Shall we run that video so that we can tell us a little bit more about what Blessed by does?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah,
Can
thanks.
we run the video now? Incredible. So you are turning consumers into entrepreneurs. Is that what
Into
you're saying?
contributors.
Contributors.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And I'd like to thank Sihun for the opportunity for giving us a chance to share what we're doing with everyone and get the travel industry to participate in a community as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. We also have Courtney Saville. Courtney is the Executive Director of the Island Foundation. And the Island Foundation was founded in 2010 by the owners of 8 Island Private Limited, which is the parent company of Nico Island and Chimpedak Island. And you joined 3 years ago, Courtney, right, as the Executive Director, and you have been laser focused on working with teachers and children on issues of sustainability, which include social, environmental, and economic, working with over 11 partner communities and potentially increasing that to 14. Tell us more about who you are and the work that you do.
Sure, thank you. So my name's Courtney. I'm from Australia originally, but I've had a long career working in Indonesia, starting back in 2008. Most recently with the Island Foundation, and it's a pleasure to be here. Web in Travel has supported the Island Foundation in previous years through the auction component of the program, so it's really an honour to be able to come and speak to everybody. You heard earlier from Andrew Dixon, there he is, who is one of the founders of the Island Foundation. Originally started as a CSR program for the business, and over time has evolved more into an independent organisation with more diversified funding streams supporting us now. So we are very focused on education, primarily in Bintan of the Liau Islands, and we're a much slower pace than what everybody has been talking about today, but I do see a lot of similarities and overlap between the issues that business is facing, that we are also facing as a small grassroots organisation, though, at a much slower, granular pace, working on systemic reform. But thank you for having me.
Great. Well, welcome to the panel. Last but not least, we have Elizabeth Liau, who is the founder of Maison de L'Asie. And Maison de L'Asie is a luxury fragrance house that is based in Singapore, but born from Asian inspirations. And that sounds fascinating. Elizabeth, tell us a little bit more about yourself and about your company.
So in a nutshell, it is a perfume house, and we create fragrances that are released in chapter stories. And so every chapter has its own theme, and it's inspired by Asia. And my background isn't actually in perfumery. I went into this a couple of years ago. I was in finance and arts for a bit. But I think I saw this as a platform where I could create experiences and stories that were centered around travel and philosophy and memories. And I did see it as the potential for a meaningful marriage between fragrances and experiences. Because I believe that, we're talking about innovation, and I believe that fragrances provides this holistic and a much more considered approach to experiences. So that formed the basis of Maison de L'Asie.
I am fascinated why you left finance to go into fragrance. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you saw and what drove you to that decision?
There's many reasons why I left finance. I was actually doing quantitative finance, so it's all maths. And so I was in private equity in the stock market for a bit. So I left it a long time ago, almost 15 years ago. Then I went to arts and arts business, which I'm very passionate about as well. I think that's another creative platform that gives me a lot of pleasure. And it just naturally gravitated towards this, I think this need, I was talking to you earlier about this need for a bit more authenticity. Because I'll be the first to admit the world doesn't actually need another perfume in the market. In fact, the world doesn't need a lot of things. But I felt like there was this need for more authentic takeaways from our experience and our existence. So and I love fragrances, so it just became this very natural transition.
Great. Mark, talking about need, I think obviously you saw a need in the market to become more sustainable and to reduce our carbon footprint. Tell us a little bit more about what drove you towards this decision to set up Carbon Trust.
Yeah. So for context, before I built Fresh Carbon, I've spent my entire career in kind of an ESG, CSR. I built my first social enterprise when I was 18 at university. And for context, the IPCC report on climate change is not universally read, but if I can summarize it, I would paraphrase the UN General Secretary, or quote him directly, who said, "The latest IPCC report is an atlas of human suffering." Let that land for a second. It really is quite painful data. We are not on course to hit any of our targets by 2030 across the board. I am incredibly hopeful we will hit net zero by 2050. We really have to. And that is a fundamental problem. How do we get there? And how do we as a community travel, explore the world, grow our businesses? How do we do this without our actions having to cost the earth? That's fundamentally the question that we spend every single waking hour of every day trying to answer, right? Through technology, through better data, through working with all of our partners on the TMC side, the online booking tool side, and then direct to enterprise.
You're essentially on a mission to save the earth. Right.
A little bit. And as we were saying, right, it all starts with problems, right? And how do you think innovatively and try and challenge things and often try not to overcomplicate it. We looked at why don't people offset enough, and for us, all the research just pointed to lack of data, lack of trust, lack of transparency. So it's, okay, how do you build something with good transparency, good trust, good data, right? And then that starts from a very positive perspective that's, all about customer-centric problem solving.
So you took a really big challenge and problem and you tried to boil it down into sort of like its components and root causes and try to attack the root cause of the issue, right?
Yeah.
So what did you end up doing?
Right, so we are the leading emissions intelligence platform for travel. What that really means is we do the reporting, reduction, and removal. Where we are is really focused on the reporting right now. It's how do we get that data inside the booking flow so that it influences the traveler at the point of search, rather than chastising them afterwards or beating them over the back, saying you don't travel sustainably or it costs the earth too much, right? Working with our corporate partners, if we can have a 5% reduction on some of those travel programs of emissions, which we can do by changing some of their travel behaviors, patterns, that kind of thing, you're looking at thousands upon thousands of tons of emissions that we're then not going to be releasing. It helps drive the airlines to invest more in things like sustainable aviation fuel or more modern aircraft. Again, with hotels, it's how do we reduce plastics, as we heard from a core earlier, right? It's fantastic if they can get that done by 2023. That's around the corner. That's fantastic, right? So, and then the more we see success stories happen, the more it both inspires the rest of the industry as well as putting pressure on them, because again, customers will make decisions based on this. One of our TMC partners told me recently that 20% of their enterprise clients have now removed hotels from their travel program because they couldn't justify their sustainability claims.
So It's actually making direct impact into decisions.
Yeah, it's a direct impact, and then where we sit is that tech platform to put all the right data in all the right places and ensure it is climate science, right? We can't go around and ignore elements of climate science because they make the data look a bit worse than we'd like it to, right? We have to own the emissions as an industry and then work to cut emissions. Because if we do not cut the emissions, someone's going to make us cut travel.
So you've taken a very, very data-driven approach in finding a solution for the big problem question, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic.
Absolutely.
Well,
data, problems, focus.
That's right. Akshai, what about yourself? What was the problems that you identified, and how did you come about to solving that?
So the problem that we are working with is not just specific to the travel industry. So the travel industry is a new outcome of what we're looking at, and the larger problem is, like, I think what we were talking about is why do enterprises exist? It's not just to make money, but it's to benefit the community at large. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do is create verticals that disrupt different industries and bring in an inclusivity to them. So what we're working on now is we're working with large hotel chains where, as Mark mentioned, we're creating bamboo toothbrushes and more sustainable dry amenities. And what started off with me and some farmers in the northwest of India making 500 toothbrushes is now making 2.5 million toothbrushes for one of the largest hotel chains in the world. We're working with one of the biggest FMCGs in the world to make 20 million toothbrushes for them end of this year. So not only is it addressing the sustainability aspect of it, but it's also you're providing employment to people in the villages. You're working directly with the farmers. And 70% of our revenue, not profit, of our revenue is going back to the communities. So it's like a win-win for everyone. The client gets a great product, the planet gets rid of plastics, you get sustainable revenue streams for people in the villages. And so what we are now working on is the travel aspect of it, which is we want everyone to spend time with these people, so partner with big platforms and hotels, and people can go spend time with these artisans and go and give to the community, give our skills, you can talk about carbon neutrality and how people in the villages can create products or can learn something where they can contribute, but also in a way that is sustainable from a participation in the economy point of view. So it's about building a bridge, basically, between the for-profit and the developmental world. That's what we're trying to do. And with the travel thing, it's actually go spend time with the people in the village and get to know them better.
I'm fascinated because you basically looked at the problem and you found a solution. I'm keen to lean into how you actually got there because I think in an earlier session, Jitari and Lily spoke about being doers, problem solvers, and connectors. It seems like that's pretty much what you did, right?
That resonated really strongly with me because that squiggle of a career has been most of my life, and I really like what they said in distilling it down to those three things, and. For me, the root of the issue is that the world that we have created has a particular mission, in terms of we all want to study, we want to do well, we want to make money, and the end goal we're working towards is money. But money doesn't make us happy. And I think that's something that we all realized during COVID is that we're looking for family, for fulfillment, for wellness and meaningful relationships. And that's what really makes us happy. And what I'm trying to do is Blessed By is almost like a Trojan horse, where it looks like a business, but it's actually this really hippie, let's love each other. That's what I really want. I want everyone to just hug each other and love each other and support each other, because that's really what we want, is to support each other and create communities that make us smile. Yeah.
I love a quote that you said earlier on, where you told me it was a quote by the Dalai Lama, right? Do you want to share that with it?
Sure. So the Dalai Lama's been a big influence in my life, and I was actually walking down the street in Amsterdam through Leidseplein, and I saw a queue of people outside Adidas and Primark, and I was reminded of something that the Dalai Lama said, which was, human beings were created to be loved, objects were created to be used. The world is in chaos because these two things are the other way around, And that's what we're trying to address at the root of it all, is to get people back to people again. And that's why we're here. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for that profound
That's a
question.
wonderful quote. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. Courtney, you work with children and in the education space, and I was fascinated to read that the Island Foundation works with children, and most of them come in by boat. It's the first generation of people living on land. It's fascinating, the communities that you're working at such grassroots levels. How did you see the need in those communities, and how does Island Foundation actually think through the engagement points in order to meet those needs?
I think a lot of similarities with what Akshai is talking about, and when you're working with communities that are quite fundamentally under-resourced, there's also a lot of positives in some ways in terms of less impact on the planet. However, they're not supported by systems, what we could probably call privilege, that allow us to be able to come up with innovation at scale and to be able to link success to it and things like that. I'm sure you probably see it as well. There's so much innovation happening from smaller scale, from how a woman approaches her housekeeping potentially, or how a community tries to address nutrition deficit by setting up a community food garden. These are all innovations, but they're not necessarily something that can be easily multiplied, or they're not getting the attention, but it's innovation nonetheless. And then, looking through and trying to see what are the barriers that a lot of children, whether they are the first generation to live on land or whether they are living on small islands remotely, the barriers that they face are purely inequality. Their barriers, or their potential for unlocking their own innovations and their own ideas, their barriers of inequality. And I think through initiatives that the Island Foundation is doing, that social enterprises are doing, now the sustainability movement is doing, is recognizing that, and to really unlock local to global solutions to the challenges that we face, and so that we can all enjoy a good quality of life, really means that we have to address those issues of inequality. They're not just education, they're also health, it's also gender, there's a huge gambit of issues that not just children but people face around the world, and it exists in all economies. It's not just underserved communities, it's across the board. But I think for all of us, we all need to be responsible for that, and it's something that has just driven me in my career, and maybe it's me dealing with my own privilege, as well, trying to see how I can live in a way that can support other people to also have fulfilling lives. And through my career, I've been able to support people with career development, organizational development, and supported the delivery of interventions across health and education that I think have really benefited people. So
That's really interesting, because when you talk about innovation, the first thing people jump to is technology, right? You always think, we have to come with a technological solution. But you talk about it in terms of barriers and trying to solve those barriers.
Yeah.
How did you identify those barriers and go through the ideation process, come up with the different options, and actually solve for the root cause that you're looking at?
Well, the issue that we're looking at is that many students from underserved communities in small island and coastal communities in Indonesia, they're leaving school without the higher order thinking skills in order to be able to participate in discussions like this, or solutions identification, or problem solving. So we came together as an organization. We discussed with our stakeholders what's the need, and for us it's a multi-pronged approach. We're working directly with students to help them develop those skills. We're also training teachers within schools to help them be able to teach better with a more student-centered focus in the classroom, and then we're also supporting our partner communities on community development initiatives like coastal rehabilitation. So we're working across what we call the learning ecosystem in order to build capacity at all of its levels. And really we're using a complex adaptive systems theory approach, which is quite it's a theory that's used in sustainability and also natural resource management. And essentially it means that you can't have an intervention at one level of the system and be able to fully predict what the outcome will be or the implications will be at different levels of the interconnected systems. So we're working with all of the stakeholders that we can, and then monitoring our impact and engagement with them, and trying to remain as agile as possible whilst also remaining calm and taking it slow, because we are working on education, which is a huge
So your idea
sector.
of innovation isn't just dealing reactively with one particular problem, but actually looking holistically in the entire ecosystem to look at how you change the entire ecosystem.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Thank you.
If I can actually jump in on innovation really breeds more innovation as well, right? So if you compare these examples, right, it's one thing for a core to then say, I'm going to use them again because it was a lovely example. It's one thing for them to say, we're going to go get rid of all our plastics. If there aren't plastic alternatives to toothbrushes, what do? They're not going to go start making their own toothbrushes. So then they come to someone like you, that improves your costs, supply chains, profitability, etc. Then you can drive down the cost to manufacture or increase what you're paying, the people making it, etc. And then it becomes more case studies, more success, and then, hey, let's invest more in innovation as well.
Yeah.
So it really does build on each other, it stacks.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it really does reinforce the point that innovation shouldn't be done in a silo. It should basically be connected
Innovation
to the
can
entire
never be done in a
ecosystem.
silo.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's only like then it's one person thinking, right? We have both people here, and we can all get more ideas together.
And travel should not be at the bottom of that R&D list that we saw on stage earlier, right? We need to get that up there. And that really comes from this audience, right? Let's invest that dollar into growing the future of your businesses.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. And Elizabeth, innovation for you, does it just mean technology, or how do you think about innovation in your space?
So I think, across the panelists and in the audience, it's quite different what we're doing. And, the theme of the conference is disruption and technology. I like to move away from just, using technology as a tool for disruption. And I think what we've been hearing is that there are softer approaches to this, and where we're really changing mindsets and, I hate this phrase, challenging the status quo of how things are currently defined by consumers, by the business community, by purveyors of experiences. And so I think it's thinking about how we can redefine things, like for me, yeah. And in this case, it would be experiences.
Experiences, basically, one of the things that when you spoke about that struck me is like, we're trying to change hearts and minds and human behavior. And it's not just the head that we're dealing with, it's also the heart, right? And a lot of it is sensorial.
Yeah.
And there is a softer edge to changing human behavior.
Yeah, so like, if I could, I like this quote by Marcel Proust, who said that, the real voyage of discovery isn't seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. So I think a lot of people today are really looking, consumers are expecting a lot more, and I think
Which is good.
Yeah, it's good. And you're looking for, I think, a more elevated interpretation of things, so it's how we want to do it, and why we're doing it.
It's great. I've heard about your values, I've heard about your vision and your execution. Now I want to know how you perceive success. Maybe we can just go around and say, what do you think success will look like in your space? How do you know you've succeeded?
Oh, I sign out when we hit net zero. Easy.
Okay, that's
Pass me
easy.
Easy
Yeah.
success. It's a yes or no. Have we done it yet?
Yeah. Akshai, what about you?
For me, success would be Best Buy would be the world's first super app for good, wherein we have a booking platform, an engagement platform, product buying platform. Like, think of all the big businesses Unilever all rolled into one, but like whatever you do on this app, a big percentage goes back to communities.
Okay, great. Courtney?
That's hard. Mine's a bigger picture, I guess, and harder to measure potentially. But success, I think, would be students that come through our program are going on to live empowered lives, and it doesn't necessarily mean financial success or anything like that, but have the capacity and the skills to be able to navigate their lives from a position of empowerment.
Nice.
Okay. Elizabeth, what about you?
I think, so for Maison de L'Asie, if we're talking just about why I started this company, I do want to see it as the first luxury house, perfume house from Asia to go global. And hopefully that happens soon.
Yeah,
we're going to see that. But I think, across everyone here in the room, there's success even in trying, whatever we're doing.
True.
Yeah.
It's an intrepid spirit of trying in itself.
Just try, just do it. Because
That's
it's a lonely journey.
a great thought and takeaway. Courtney, any takeaways from you before we wrap up on one thought on innovation?
Sorry?
One thought on innovation that you want to leave with the audience.
I think that in order to unlock innovation, we all need to be looking harder at the issues of inequality and how we can address those.
Inequality. Okay, great. Akshai, what about yourself?
I'd say innovation comes from stepping away from the problem and getting a bigger picture and seeing how things connect. That's how I work, like, as a creative person.
Great.
Yeah.
Mark?
I'll go super practical. There are a ton of awesome kind of early stage startups in this network, all trying to work and partner with various organizations here. So to the enterprises, the buyers and corporates in the room, I would say if you want to increase your success rate, double your failure rate. Right? Be ready to work with some startups knowing that not all of them will work out, but the ones that do, when you partner early, will absolutely deliver the goods for you.
Fail forward, keep trying, have more failures than successes, but
Absolutely.
then doesn't let that stop you. I just want to end off with a quote by Sarah Ben Breternich, and she's an author, philanthropist, and public speaker. She says, "The world needs dreamers, and the world needs doers. But above all, what the world needs most are dreamers that do." All right? Be the dreamers that do. With that, please thank the panel. Right.